All right. It's 5:30. We're going to call this Iowa City Historic Preservation Commission meeting to order. It's Wednesday, May 22nd, 2024. And we'll begin with roll call.
Stewart, present.
Walou Reynolds. Bowman.
Frank Wagner.
Sellergren.
Lewis.
Villanueva. Beck.
All right. Public discussion of anything not on the agenda. I believe we have one person sitting in the back.
Didn't expect you to have so many people here.
I know. We did. Sorry, I didn't tell you.
How much time do I have, Jordan?
3 minutes.
God, 3 minutes? For real? It's draconian.
We don't want to be here all night.
Okay. My name is Thomas Agrin. I live in the north side, and I was on the commission for like 7 years, so I overlapped with some people here, but not everybody. And I just wanted to talk about the council meeting last night really quickly, and some things I've been thinking about, both based off of conversations I had with the mayor pro tem right before the meeting, and as well as like reflections I have based on this experience that just happened. I'm not gonna be able to keep this to 3 minutes, Jordan, but I'll be as quick as I can, okay?
Okay.
One of the things that like was a really big, one of the things that I want to think about is like what the next step is. Last night was a huge victory, and everybody should be congratulated on that. And also, I doubted that it was even going to happen, and so that was really exciting to see. You know, one of the things that I talked about in my speeches to council on the issue was that like most of downtown is not protected, and you guys all know this, but it's like if this is the level of battle that we have to go through to landmark like a total easy home run, then downtown just doesn't stand a chance. If the whole supermajority thing is the only approach, it's like, whoa, going to be really, really, really hard. Because if people think they have lottery tickets in the north side, they are going to think they have lottery tickets, like Powerball tickets downtown, okay? So I think that there's a few things to think about. And one is that I think that you guys should, as part of that effort of landmarking downtown, not even focus on the buildings at this stage, but really focus on increasing staff time and talking to council, talking to the city manager about like getting staff hours back up. I think that that will make all kinds of issues with the Preservation Commission and the interfacing with the public better if people are well resourced. That's what I would do first. Second, like, people get frustrated with preservation, and that's what part of what the mayor pro tem was telling me, because the answer is always, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that. And of course, I am party of the convinced. I know why it's important to save your windows and blah, 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 and the diminishing returns of vinyl windows, et cetera, et cetera. However, we also know that the reason that we have these districts is because they are like a blunt force action to save property and preserve neighborhoods. They exist as the only thing that we have because we do not have a form-based code to otherwise protect and preserve neighborhoods while also allowing them to evolve. And so I think that you guys should really think also about how the Preservation Commission works with the Zoning Commission and advocates for form-based code. I think that that would be a good look for the Preservation Commission to say, we are open to seeing the neighborhoods evolve, and we're open to, you know, this avenue rather than this only tool that we have to stop people from tearing things down and doing bad stuff to buildings. That's one thing I would think about. The other thing is that, you know, when I was on the commission, one of the reasons that I stayed on it for 7 years is because so many people on the commission really just seemed to get off on telling people no for what they wanted to do with their properties, because maybe they had really labor of love fixed up their properties forever and ever and ever. And I own historic houses, and I get it, you know, but I think that it creates a lot of enemies when we say no to projects. And part of why I stayed on the commission was because I felt like if I wasn't there, if my voice wasn't on the commission, it was skewing to the most conservative interpretations of the standards. And my priorities were to preserve the character of the neighborhood, not like the trim. And I think it's great to preserve the trim. I think that's really important. But I think that a lot of what created the friction at the council level for this supermajority is an interpretation that that's all preservation cares about, is saving the trim, and that's all we do is say no, 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 no. You have to do it the same way it was done in the 19th century. So I think that if we can look at the standards and think about what are we really trying to preserve, and I'm not saying to remove the expectations or the requirements or anything. I'm just saying my experience over those 7 years was that there were often different ways to think about things and different ways to talk about what was approved. And I think if we can be more open-minded as a commission, we will create more allies, because the enemies that we create talk to the council members when this kind of shit happens. And if any one of them ends up listening to what is often an unreasonable and bogus argument, they listen, and it only takes one vote to trip this up. So as we look towards if we really try to landmark downtown and buildings downtown, we are going to be looking at a lot of supermajority votes. And so we have to figure out a different strategy so that people don't get weary, and ultimately so that these buildings don't fail, because we can't be taking every single thing to a supermajority vote every single time. So 7 minutes? I don't know.
It was-
Thanks. Okay.
But I misused my
Thanks.
timer, so
Yeah, well,
thank you.
thanks for your patience.
Appreciate it. All right, item D, National Register nomination for the Iowa City Community Recreation Center at 2020 South Gilbert.
Okay, we will be evaluating the National Register nomination for the Rec Center, otherwise known as the Robert A. Lee Community Rec Center. Just a little background. So first of all, we got a letter that accompanies the nomination that explains what the commission is supposed to do. The process for National Register nomination is that once it has been gone through the state, just the National Register coordinator and the state staff, they kind of work with the writer to come up with a finished nomination. And then it goes to the State Nomination Review Committee, which is sometimes called SNRC. In this case, it will go on June 14th, and if any of you, they do that by Zoom. If you want to watch, I will get the Zoom link for you. Part of that is our review, because afterwards it will go to the National Park Service, and they're the ones that determine whether or not it's listed in the National Register. As a certified local government, we review it mostly because of the fact that we are the local government. So we are familiar with the building, we are familiar with the significance of the building to the community, and we are aware of the architecture and changes and stuff like that. And so what we do is we fill out a form that I forgot to actually provide in your packet. It is here. And I gave a copy to Jordan. And what we'll do is we'll fill it out. We'll mark the applicable criteria, and then we will note whether or not we recommend that it's listed in the National Register or not. We can also make some comments if we would like. And whether or not we make comments each time we do this, it totally depends on the property. The staff recommendation includes some comments, and we'll go over those. So, as you know, this is a portion of Iowa City with the Pentacrest located here and Iowa Avenue. We have Gilbert Street and the Rec Center located here between Gilbert and Van Buren and College and Burlington Street. As you can see, it's a mostly rectangular building. It's basically intersecting rectangular blocks, as well as some overhangs. Here is the current street view from Gilbert Street. Nice low rectangular building with this cantilevered overhang, a little bit of a larger volume behind that you can just see. This shows one of the design drawings at one of the steps during the process. The reason why I included this is because part of what was going on with this building is it was going to be a portion of a new civic corridor. It started with the construction of the police and fire station, I think maybe around 1961, then the rec center in 1964, and then the building that we're in. And so here are some elevations of the building that we are in, this being the south elevation and the west elevation, like from the co-op. And here were some preliminary elevations of the rec center. Of course, it had changed since that point in time. I'll just show you some overall exterior photos to remind you a little bit. This is more from the corner of Burlington and Gilbert, looking at the south end of the west elevation. And again, you have this, the volumes, the rectangular volumes with this overhang, a little bit of a kind of that idea of the flat planes cantilevering. This, of course, is a flat plane now, but wasn't originally. And here again, we have these intersecting boxes and forms, and part of modern architecture is this idea of really working with the geometry, repeating geometry. The nomination talks about how the architect did some of the other buildings during this time, like the Lemmy School and stuff, with a different type of geometry that was intersecting. This one just happens to be rectangular. Here we have the current east facade. Again, this is a two-story, large rectangular space. This rectangular volume projecting to the side, and then the rise here. From the bridge, again, just this intersecting rectangles and planes. And you can really see that emphasis on kind of this brick facade at this point. Some of modernism also has to do with these just unadorned planes, walls without windows. You know, you're not going to have some of the architectural detail that you have in older structures, because it's more of a simplification, or it's more modern, clean lines. But you also have an emphasis with glazing and glass. And then here from the corner where the new Chauncey building is. So National Register eligibility consists of two parts. They are integrity, or the existence of the original materials, forms, some other things that we'll go over, and the building's significance. And so we will look at both of those. For integrity, they must have sufficient integrity to convey their significance. So depending on how the building is significant, it needs to have the integrity related to that. So if a building is significant for its architecture or its engineering, then those things should be apparent. If it's significant for something else, then maybe more alterations of the architecture do not diminish its significance. So it kind of depends on how the building is considered significant. A building also only needs to be significant in one area to be eligible. If a building is significant in multiple areas, it's totally fine to include them all in a nomination, but only one is actually required. The 7 aspects of integrity are listed here: location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. The nomination does go through and include a short paragraph for each of them, explaining how it has either good or excellent integrity in each of those areas. I did put the image here, just the link in the memo that I included for you, and also a link in our letter about how we're supposed to review it, goes to this Bulletin 15, which is the National Register criteria, how you evaluate a building for the National Register. So if you haven't looked at it yet and want to look at it in the future, you can go there and read up on it. Okay, so for this building, the nomination includes 2 areas of significance. Criterion A, which is generally an event. It's a property associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. And criterion C, in this case architecture, a property that embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represent the work of a master or that possess high artistic value. In this case, with this building, we're not going with the approach of the work of a master because of the fact that it's a little bit more difficult to evaluate that. We do have a living architect. In fact, he is here tonight. And so it is preferred to discuss their work at least after they've finished practicing, which I believe he's retired, but honestly, preferably after they are no longer with us. It's because that gives you the distance that you need to evaluate all of the works that they have done. And then the ones that are significant, or not all of them, for instance, not everything by, say, I.M. Pei is going to be eligible for the National Register. It would be a building that would be significant as a part of their work or a certain era or in a certain community or something like that. And so this nomination does not attempt to say it's a work of the master, but it does say that it is eligible for its architecture as an example of a style and a specific use of a style. Okay, so in this case, for event, it is the nomination, in a nutshell, it says basically it is a local, so the significance is local, not state or national, example of mid-20th century architecture, community planning and development, social history, and recreation or entertainment. And I will find the rest of that to read too, if I can. Okay. Okay, yeah, I will read this paragraph from the nomination. The Iowa City Community Recreation Center is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places under Criterion A as an excellent local example of mid-20th century architecture, community planning and development, social history, and recreation entertainment. It was built in 1964, and it represents the construction of civic and municipal buildings following World War II, when the economy was robust and was propelling the golden economic age, unquote, of the 1950s forward into the 1960s. The American public was looking for additional recreation activities to fill the increasing amounts of leisure time available to them, while Iowa City was catching up on long-delayed municipal improvements. So the nomination includes a history of recreation buildings in Iowa City, including the destruction by fire of 2 earlier recreation buildings. And this section also describes the conditions in which the building was built, including a strong community desire to replace the previous facility, local and broad cultural needs for expanding recreation opportunities, and the construction of the new civic corridor. So the nomination includes the maps, which I've snipped out here. So this is the caption from the nomination, and then this below is I added. But for Criterion A, this map is the plat map of Iowa City, and it shows that this area here, bounded by Gilbert, Van Buren College, and Burlington, was, even when the city was platted, was a park. So it was community space or open space. This is the 1933 fire insurance map. Basically, this section talks about how there was an interest in having a recreation center, and it does kind of grow out of progressive movements, interests in health and cleanliness, improving things, but also after the war when people had more leisure time. The first recreation center built and shown here on this Sanborn map was the American Legion building. And so it was built in 1928, and it was destroyed by fire in 1936. Here's a photo of it, and this is also from the nomination. The next one was the community building, and this I didn't write down the exact date it was built, but we started working on it right after the fire, and it then was also destroyed by fire in 1955. But this is the 1954 map that shows where it was located, just in the same place as the American Legion building. As all of this is going on, we had community recreation, but we had a need for a swimming pool. The history of Iowa City includes many people swimming in the river and, doing things that we wouldn't probably do now. The dam changing, how the river flows, a child death, etc., all leads to the eventual construction of the City Park pool in 1949. Along with the idea that we are creating this new civic corridor after the community building, the second recreation center, burned, then came the plan for the new recreation center. And at this time, it was determined that we needed more pool places. And so a pool was designed into it. And so that's basically like the gist of why it is significant to our building. It really represents a great interest in recreation. We've had a history of this open space in this area, a community need for a recreation building, increasingly interest in pools and swimming and doing that safely leads to the need for a pool in the downtown area. And for all those reasons, it became significant. I'm sorry, I'm having a hair attack. Those of you with curly hair will understand. The other way that the building is listed as significant is because of its architecture. And I will also read this part, if I can find it. But the nomination describes it as follows. The Iowa City Community Recreation Center is also eligible for the National Register of Historic Places under Criterion C as an excellent local example of modern movement municipal architecture. The building represents the architectural style of low, horizon-hugging profiles with clean lines, little ornamentation, and functionality of interior space. Through its large windows, the plan merges interior space with the outdoors, and its use of prefabricated industrial materials enabled increased open interior space and circulation, while also allowing for swift, cost-efficient construction. Using modern movement schematics and innovations, architect Roland Wehner combined aesthetic, functional, and decorative ideas into a custom design with distinctive characteristics and high artistic values. And so the nomination includes a history of the education and practice of the architect and his work in modern movement and design, the use of a grid system and design modules based on geometric shapes were an important aspect of his designs. And as the nomination states on page 29, quote, Wehner began by applying form follows function principles and concepts where relationships between site, materials, and the people who use the buildings are considered. By using the natural sloping geography to his advantage, Wehner efficiently laid out the two-story structure, allowing it to present as a long, low building from its west facade. He designed the structure using concrete, brick, and glass to achieve a natural harmony, end quote. So again, this was that sketch, before the final design was coming around, but it does show how it is part of that group of municipal architecture designed in the modern style. This image is one of the construction photos, and it shows, we're working with pre-stressed concrete beams. We have these T-shaped concrete beams that provide structure and allow a long span. You can see the concrete block and brick are very modular, allowing you to basically take that module and expand it, and everything will then work together. And, your brick wall's not going to end up with little pieces. That's the basics of it. Here we have the interior of the the west entry. It does show the terrazzo flooring. That's one of the important aspects. It's very durable. It's like a modern material. We have the exposed structure of the modern building. Here we have the high ceiling and the long span in the social room. We have all of the glazing to the exterior as well as the interior glazing between the rooms, letting light come in. All of these are very modern aspects of the building. We do have a significant number of changes to this building. There are 4 pages of a table that include changes. With a continually used building, you would expect some of these changes for safety and security as situations change, adding accessibility, fire code changes. There are certain things that would happen with a community building that would be expected. And well, one of the things I didn't mention yet is every building that's listed in the National Register also has what's considered a period of significance. In this case, the period of significance extends from the time that it was constructed in 1964 until 50 years ago, basically, or in this case, they're saying 1974. 50 years is typically the cutoff. I mean, it's been continually used as a recreation center with just some minor changes to how the spaces are used inside. But that does also allow for changes that were done within that period of significance to not detract from the significance of the building. Typically, changes that are made after that could detract from the significance of the building. And so some of those changes in the staff report, we wrote that we have some concerns about some of the changes, partly because of the fact that they alter some of the main areas that where a person would approach the building, enter the building, kind of how the building interacts with the public from, how they enter it, and how some of the changes to how people would interact with it. In this case, we have the west facade. We had kind of this accordion profile of the basically inverted part of the T-truss in this cantilevered canopy. It was a thin line. The original color, it was dark, so it really accented that thin line. And since then, it's been converted so that it has a flat roof. We don't have that same accent on the structure. It's the main cantilever, and so that was one of the concerning changes, as well as the fact that originally the facade, it was a curtain wall, but it had areas of panel that you couldn't see through and glass. And the areas of glass tended to be very horizontal with the panel, below, maybe above. I can't remember here on this part of the facade, but it was really emphasizing the horizontal. You also had the concrete block screen that also matched a screen that we used to have here. And those, these concrete blocks were mass produced at that time, and it was a decorative feature, but it was also, it was a screen. It was letting light and air through, but it was also creating a little bit of a sense of privacy in the offices there. So right now, the emphasis without the screen on this wall tends to be with these vertical, the columns still remain that were between the screen that you can see here. Here's another view of it. This kind of shows you the one end. So right now, we have just basically a glass curtain wall. And we have just a little bit of view of what that wall was before, a little bit of a fascia or transom area that was panel, the glazed area, panel below with some venting in it. As this repeated across this portion of the facade, it would have been a horizontal strip of glass. And now we have, an overall curtain wall. This is not at the same angle, just because I took the pictures directly from the nomination and didn't take other ones. But here's the swimming pool side of it. You know, this panel and glazing doesn't have that same horizontal emphasis, but it is more horizontal than the overall curtain wall that we currently have now. Changes to glazing over time, especially when we're talking about, the modern era did use experimental materials. And so there are cases where, some of those materials might have needed to be replaced because, if it was an insulated glass unit, then its seal probably broke. If it wasn't an insulated glass unit, it probably needed to be because of the fact that it was a curtain wall. So some of those changes, again, are to be expected, but the curtain wall design is different than what it was before. And if we continue around to the east side, we can see that, originally we had, here it's the flat, it's not this kind of, it's not the same as the canopy on the west facade, but we do have that emphasis on the thin line of the roof edge, the T-shaped structure, these planes that are kind of intersecting that you see with the emphasis on the brown fascia edge. And then you had this kind of patio with that screen repeated again. Now, some of this change needed to happen because of accessibility and issues with this area and the parking lot and how this space was used. So again, some changes are probably to be expected. But we do have an overall change of, again, the curtain wall. It's now very vertical with these larger mullions in between. We lose this horizontal area that intersected kind of with the cantilever of the entry. And then, again, the roof edge has changed. It doesn't emphasize quite the same. It's become thicker as well. When we move to the inside, the glazing basically of that wall that was hid by the screen continues onto the inside, and this kind of reception desk area where the public would come in, very light-filled space, and then interact with staff at this point. And this area, reflected a lot of the glazing that you have between, like, the viewing area and the pool, and the social hall and the pool, and increases the interaction between staff and the public. And now the same staff area has become more like a common office, and so that has changed. We still have this glazing area. It has changed. And this could just have to do with kind of modern curtain wall construction. But we have a structural member here that bisects the glazing that did not exist in the original one. I think I might have a photo of that too, and just some other changes. But there was always kind of this emphasis on this vertical that you see in this part of the curtain wall. There have been some changes that may not be as significant. This area, the game room, became a weight room. But we divided the space, but we're including more glazing, something that is a part of the architecture. It doesn't obstruct the view. It makes two defined spaces, but a change like this might not negatively impact the architecture the same way as the other changes. And we have some changes to the pool area. Here we had some patterning and things in the wall. I know there has been some changes to the wall because of sound and acoustics. And again, that would be a change that happens over time. Oh yeah, here's a picture of the original opening. Just a lot more structure added in the newer version. And so part of the comments relate to the fact that staff is concerned about some of the changes and how they impact the integrity of the building for Criterion C. Staff does not think that the changes impact Criterion A. only C. And currently, the recommendation would be to have the SNRC committee evaluate that specifically. When we're going through, we also noticed an error, and so we wanted to point that out because we do hope to also include that as a comment. This, you can't see it very well here. Let me see if I can move this. Okay, this page is a page from Marla Svensson's 2001 study of downtown. And when she did that study, this black boundary that you can see here is the boundary for the study. So every property within that boundary, she studied for its eligibility as a district. And then she determined that there were two historic districts in this area in 2001. One is the Jefferson Street District and one is downtown. And her caption says, "The map of Iowa City showing survey boundaries for potential downtown historic district and East Jefferson Street Historic District shaded." And so these boundaries for these two districts are these shaded areas. I put a little star where the rec center is, just so you notice, but that I added that. Okay, now it's not going to let me do this here. Okay, so this is a page from the nomination. And the caption for this says, "Map of Iowa City showing survey boundaries for potential downtown historic district, including the block where the Iowa City Recreation Center is located north of Burlington Street, etc. A black rectangle added to the original map represents the Iowa City Recreation Center." So that black rectangle isn't there. The concern was that this caption seemed to imply that the recreation center was part of the district that Marlis had found in 2001, and it was not. The district boundaries are these same shaded areas, and again, here is the area. And so multiple staff members noticed this and thought that it said that the rec center was part of a downtown district, and the study did not. And so that is another comment that we would just like to include to clarify the caption for this one map. Okay, so this is the recommended motion. The recommended motion would be that the property is eligible for listing in the National Register in criterion category A and C at the local level and meets the criteria for both significance and integrity. If the commission wanted to suggest that they thought it was only eligible in one or the other, you could modify the motion. You don't have to. You could keep it as it is. And then you could also decide whether or not you wanted to include either or both of these comments or make your own comments. And then what we will do is we will write the comments up, we will put them on the form, and Jordan will sign it, I will sign it, and we will also have the mayor sign it. The comments that staff suggests would be that we would ask the State Nomination Review Committee to carefully evaluate the modernist elements of the design to determine if the building has enough integrity in this regard to remain eligible under Criterion C. And so that does put the onus on reviewing that on the committee. Also, note that the caption for Map 4 implies that the 2001 study found a historic district that included the recreation center. This would be a misinterpretation of the map from the study where the district areas are shaded, not outlined.
Got it.
That's it.
So we will make a motion, then open up for public.
No, open for public comment first, and then when you've heard everyone, also, you can ask me any questions. You could ask the writer. She's here, and she will speak and have a presentation too.
Great.
And you could ask any questions. And then once you're done with the questions, then make your motion and discuss.
Okay. Does anybody have clarifying questions for Jessica right now? No. Okay. All right. We'll open it up for public comment. I would like to limit everybody to 3 minutes. If possible, but I don't know how to use the timer, so I'm just going to monitor it on my phone, and I'll give you a little warning.
And
So-
please sign in on the sheet up front.
My name is Mary Bennett, and I did prepare this nomination, and I was not aware that I was under a time constraint. So first of all, I want to thank you, the commission, for taking the time to review this document. I know it's very time-consuming and tedious sometimes to look at these long files. I also want to thank Lorinda Bradley of the State Historic Preservation Office, who helped me with this to try to address some of the concerns that Jessica has brought up, and also recognize that this is a team effort. And that in particular, I'd like to acknowledge the architect, Roland C. Weiner, is back here and gave us much of insider advice about the building and its construction and design. Jan Olive Full began the process by outlining what some of our issues would be. And then Jill Fishbaugh and Justin Fishbaugh have been a great help to me as well. And this is an unusual opportunity because you have a modern building under consideration, and this is probably one of the first times that type of building has been brought before the commission. In terms of who I am, I worked nearly 50 years at the State Historical Society of Iowa and have prepared several National Register nominations. And I was also a city employee who taught deep end aerobics and other aerobic classes at the pool and in the social hall for about 18 years. But I want to reiterate that this is not about the pool. This is about the building, because it offers many amenities, and we need to look at it as a whole thing. And I think the thing I wanted to talk about, and I'm sorry again because I did not realize this, but there's going to be a lot of overlap between what I say and even my slides replicate many that Jessica used, because I did not know that she would be talking over some of these points. But let me just review the historical integrity in those 7 points that she mentioned. And this has been written in concert again with the State Historic Preservation Office, and they're in agreement with what is on this page. Location. The building retains its original address, and therefore the integrity of the location is intact and excellent. Design is excellent as to the footprint, form, plan, and interior room arrangement, although a glass partition wall has been added to the game room and a reception counter has been enclosed on the upper level and relocated to the lower level. Of greater importance is the loss of visual integrity after removal of exterior concrete screens from the west facade south of the main entrance and from the terrace near the east entrance area, leaving the exterior with good but not excellent integrity. Nonetheless, the principles based on modern movement and architectural style still define the most prominent design features and characteristics and match some of the elements, as she mentioned, in this building itself.
May I just interrupt? I'm going to let you just complete what you need to say.
It's like an application.
Exactly, yeah. So just please go on until you
Okay.
finish. Thank
So number 3 was setting, and the character of the setting has determined to be good because it's centrally located in downtown Iowa City, and as defined by that 1839 city planning map, it's in an area that was identified for public recreation and municipal use since 1839. Number 4 was materials. Most of the building's structural and exterior materials remain intact and have excellent integrity. Although the windows were changed by choice after, wear and tear, but also because of the tornado damage in 2006, which I think raised concerns about the pool windows in particular. They remain commercial-type windows made of similar or sympathetic aluminum framing and insulated glass, and they fill the same fenestration openings of the original design. Number 5 is workmanship. The workmanship is excellent, with fine brickwork and cast pre-stressed T-beams intact and exposed for public viewing and examination. There's no significant structural problems existing in the building, nor are there deteriorating finishes on the interior or exterior, even after 50 years of active use. Number 6 is feeling, and the feeling has been determined to be excellent in reflecting the low horizontal and cubic lines of mid-century modern movement architecture. The building can evoke an emotional response or memory that cannot be expressed in words, but is conveyed by familiar, unchanged spaces. Association is excellent and intact with the development of commercial precast, pre-stressed concrete construction of mid-century municipal and non-residential buildings. It also demonstrates the history of Iowa City and continued provision of services for citizens with a community center at this location for approximately 100 years, as well through its association with innovative architect Roland C. Weiner and retired recreation superintendent Robert A. Lee, both who were instrumental in current facilities development. I'm not going to repeat all that Jessica said about criteria A and criteria B, but I do want to emphasize again that as a municipal building in Iowa City, the property is eligible under criteria A as a significant example of how modernism and careful, methodical city and comprehensive planning helped to change the broader built environment and also contributed an enduring and versatile structure for many generations of Iowa Cityans to use. The building has good integrity and has retained much of its original appearance, feeling, and association with only minor alterations to design elements, setting, materials, and workmanship. It continues to serve the community as a recreational, cultural, social, and municipal building. Its central location and accessible design of interior spaces continue to make it Iowa City's most used recreational facility. And that comment comes from an October 22 recreational comprehensive plan. So we know it's a very popular place in our town. As far as criterion C, a representative of mid-century modern movement architectural style, again repeating what Jessica said about the low horizon-hugging profiles with cubic lines and efficient functionality of interior spacing resulting from modular design elements. So those are just sort of summation things, and I wanted to comment on a couple of things if you want to change the slide. These are key reasons why I think the commission could consider preserving this building. And I want to review again that it's structurally sound. It's a rare example of municipal planning in Iowa. Its original functions have been retained for the most part. The architectural integrity is intact despite those changes. It's proven to be versatile and adaptable. Yes, some functions have changed, but the building has suited those changes well. The central location favors the goals of walkability in our community. Retaining the structure favors sustainability goals because we don't end up with demolished materials in a landfill. And probably most important to me are community memories and stories are preserved. And I can't really go into all the history, which is the richest part of the nomination to me, but it honors the vision of Robert A. Lee, who you may not know I had the honor of doing an oral history with, and he was involved in the D-Day invasion of northern France in World War II. And Roland Wayner, who has created many beautiful structures in our community, whether it be schools or churches or public buildings. So I think that when we look at the history of our community and ways in which buildings can tell stories and remind us of the past and the experiences that our grandparents had or that we hope our grandchildren to have, that remembering these two men is very significant to me. So I want to go back to the maps real quickly. This, as I said, was part of the 1839 plan. And Jessica covered that, so you can go to the next slide very quickly and jump over that. It shows up on the 1868 bird's eye view as largely a open space with the, as you see off in the distance, the College Green Park had also been designated. And let's go to the next map, because I wanted to indicate that in the narrative of the nomination, it points out that the building was not eligible to be on the National Register because it was not old enough. It was, you have to be 50 years old, and in 2001 it was not. So I did not mean to imply by the use of this map that I misunderstood that, because that refinement in the argument is within the narrative. And go ahead and go to the next one. You're going to find that Jessica and I chose to use exactly the same slides in many forms. But I want to talk about the ways in which this is a modern picture of the wall. But the whole idea of using the windowless cubic form, the geometry that he uses on the north side of this west facade is important to modern architecture design. And I want to talk about the concrete blocks. They were originally intended as a wall of glass shielded by these concrete block screens. And the newer replacement windows that you see there are sympathetic in style. And lining that walkway or terrace, a very narrow terrace there, if you want to go to the next slide, this is the way that concrete blocks look. But if you go to the very next slide, you can, and this is again, as she showed this, it's further down, but one more slide will show you that the structural elements that were used to support those concrete blocks are still there. So it would be very easy for us to replace or restore that decorative block if for some reason someone determined they had the money to do it, or they wanted to restore the original appearance of the building. If you want to go to the next slide, this is again the southwest corner of the building. And I'm just going to use this again to contrast that the windows are in exactly the same fenestration as they originally were. There were really no new openings made. I actually think the original windows were more vertical in nature and not as horizontal as this modern stuff looks. But as you go to the next slide, those large window wall or curtain wall that are on the south side of the pool have a solar effect, and they warm the pool. One of the letter writers said the sunlight dances on the water when you're in the pool. It's a very important element about the feeling of the building when you're in that space along that south wall, because it allows both natural light into the building and illuminates the pool area. But again, they're in the same fenestration. This is something that the State Historic Preservation and I discussed repeatedly. She believes, Lorinda, that it still retains the overall aesthetic as the design intended. You'll also notice there's protruding brick walls that help define that space and terrace area, and now we have a garden space in that area. But even as long as 10 years ago, that was just a flat patio out there. If you want to go to the next pool picture, both of these show this incredibly clever thing that they did in order to support the weight of that south wall. And so this east facade, it contributes to the dynamic geometric appearance of the building, and the celestial windows between the T-beams allow natural light to enter the space from both the east and the west side. It's a virtual wall of glass. And to explain a little bit about that, he had to have, because of the length and height of that wall, which is actually 24 feet high, they had to have additional wind bracing and stability. So they did that by filling cells of the concrete block with reinforcing rods and grout, and dedicated basically masonry pilasters to hold that wall up. And that's a very important design feature on the structural integrity of this building, and is still very visible today. Also, looking over to the right where you see these cantilevered things, those upper transoms and the T-beams, those also provide light into the gymnasium from both the east and the west side, which again makes that space a very inviting place. On this east side, again, go to the next slide, there were significant changes because of the ADA need to put a ramp in there. But I wanted to say, again, a little clever thing, if you look at the original floor plans, that was called the teen terrace. And it was specifically an interest for teenagers to use. And when you think about the 1950s and 60s and the emergence of teen culture, it's very clever for the architect to have responded to that. Going to the next shot, we have the north side here where you can see clearly where those beams are allowing the light into the gymnasium. You also have a little cutout here which allowed for the north wall of the arts room to have that curtain wall of windows, again contributing to the geometric effect. As I said earlier, you don't need to necessarily always worry about the interior on a National Register thing, but we're going to discuss it because it is something that's been subjected to change. So if you want to go to the next slide, this is the same image that Jessica used. But again, you see that this is original layout of the floor plan, and the design remain essentially the same. We have a transition zone between the lobby and the outside area. Also, I wanted to point out that the buff-colored brick of the building exterior is introduced into the interior walls here as a transition. You can see it a little bit clearer here in the image on the left. So that the use of this buff-colored brick, the plastered walls rather than concrete block walls, the original globe-shaped light fixtures hanging in the lobby, the terrazzo flooring, and the wooden doors are stained a dark brown. These all appear on the upper level where room functions might include more formal business and public areas. Everything now on the lower level is pretty much concrete block, but they definitely dress this particular part up. It also is sort of the gateway into the building where you can enter into all the other areas, including the stairwell. If you want to go to the next slide, this is again a repeat of what Jessica showed you, but it was originally a very light-filled space. It still is now, but because of security and COVID and other reasons, that office has become one common office and closed off. And the reception desk, which was there again up until just maybe 8 or 9 years ago, that opening, I used to go get my paycheck there. That change has altered it, but it doesn't, it's because function had to be altered because of the administrative offices. And then going to the next slide, we have the social hall, again, the same slide, but what I want to point out here is how the entire south wall of the social hall is exactly the same as it was when it was built in 1964. And again, there's high celestial windows in that, but what you have there is a chance to look down into the pool area, and it was created as an extra space for spectators who might be wanting to look at competitive sports in that area. And also right off of the lobby, if you want to go to the next slide, oh, this is a fun one to look at because there was a weekly paper doll dance that went way back to the 1930s for teenagers in junior high and high school. And as Jan Ollie-Fold told me, this was a picture that she found because it's part of her memory. And talking to Karen Cubby the other day, she said she had her first kiss after a dance at the social hall. So those are the kind of memories that we can't encapsulate when we're looking at bricks and mortar, but they're very important to the integrity of the building and how we might evaluate it. So the next shot is going to show you, adjacent to the lobby, is a balcony that was a visual extension of the lobby and a key link into one of the building's most significant features, the swimming pool on the lower level. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that the only thing that really changed on that balcony was the railing for it. And you can also see, again, those, what I would consider vertical windows on the south side that allowed a lot of light to come in as well as the ones along the ceiling level. To speak about the pool itself, it's a 145,000-gallon swimming pool. There's 6 lanes, 25 yards long. Might fit the bill for Julie that she can, if she can't get her 25-yard long lanes out at City Park, she'd have a year-round set of lanes here in this pool. There's a 10-foot deep diving well and a wading pool that's 1 7/10 feet in depth. This is a pool that was supported by creosote-treated wood pilings that were capped with concrete. So this robust construction produced a pool that has not leaked to this day. And if we had some better management and vision going on in the Parks and Rec Department, we would not restrict the hours of this pool because it's prohibited use and participation with the limited hours that have been in place now for, I think, 4 or 5 years after the pandemic. So, this pool is very special to people, as you saw in many of the letters. But again, the beauty of it is the direct sunlight generates enough heat to warm the water and pool on sunny days, reducing overall energy costs. And the lighting in there is just magnificent. It's really a magical place. I spent many, many hours in that pool. Going to the next slide, we're looking at changes that were made with the game room. And I also want to mention a couple of other changes that I don't have slides for, which is that the staircase was originally an open riser staircase, and that was enclosed, and sympathetic terrazzo flooring was put in, and also an elevator was installed. So those were part of the accessibility between the upper and lower levels. Those modifications were necessary, and they don't really impact the functioning. They improve the functioning of the building, but they don't really interfere too much with the design. The exercise room was remodeled in a sympathetic manner in March of 2015, and the glass enclosure allows the area to retain a sense of openness as in the original floor plan. If you go to the next slide, you can see that that exercise room is created there. But again, along the north wall of the pool are the windows that are on the south part of this room, which again are still used by parents watching their children swim or could be used for spectators watching competitive swimming. Going to the next slide, I just want to emphasize other changes have been made, like single-use restrooms have been modified to be ADA. The restroom that was on the deck of the pool was also modified in a different way so it can be a private dressing room. The other key feature of the building is the enormous block that houses the gymnasium, which measures 82 by 94 feet and accommodates 2 full-size basketball courts and serves multiple functions relating to competitive sports, fitness, recreation, entertainment, education. And one of the fun things is, and important things is, the maple flooring is set on rubber cushions. This is forward-thinking in terms of versatility and durability because the hardwood floor in the gymnasium was laid down with 5 1/4 inch thick boards instead of the usual thickness of 3/4 inch boards. This was done purposefully so the floor could be maintained by sanding and refinishing without causing excessive wear, but more importantly, it could withstand the rigors of roller skating, which was very popular in this building, the scuffs of ordinary street shoes, and other intended uses of that space. And we don't have an image of it, but one of the clever things that Mr. Wayner included was an observation port. And so if you're up on the upper level, there's a curved plexiglass window that you can look down and see all the activities on both sides of the court. So in terms of the alterations, the footprint and primary functions of the building remain unchanged. Although the alterations have taken place, the original design characteristics based on modern movement architecture style and methods persist in the building's distinctive visual identity. In terms of interior changes, the floor plan remains the same, with most of the room functions remaining the same for more than 50 years. Exception would be in what was a rifle range at one time is now a weight room. But it wasn't even a rifle range when it was first built. That was added later. The original design characteristics, again, based on the modern movement, have been retained, and the visual interior spaces are linked visually with the use of interior glass curtains and side lights next to any entrance doors that are there. And as Jessica pointed out, there's an entire list of these things. This was prepared for the benefit of the State Review Committee so they could do exactly what you want them to do, which is to weigh and balance what those changes really mean about the use of the building and its look. If you want to go, I have 3 quick slides to show you here. This is the arts and crafts room. It's virtually unchanged except for the curtain wall of windows has changed. Quickly to the next slide, meeting room A, and the next slide, meeting room B, have essentially the same look that they always did. I was surprised, but there's another emergency exit out of B that takes you to that temporary, or that small terrace that was next to the concrete blocks. And in the social hall, there's a back stairwell, which is an emergency exit. So again, the architect took public safety into consideration at all times. And the last slide here is just the kitchen, which I thought was, again, very clever, because on the right here above the sink is an opening that would allow you to pass food or materials over to meeting room A during meetings. So I won't read the criteria A and B, C over again, because Jessica did that. But this building has a very rich history, and the original community building that was built there in 1928 was 10 years after World War I. There's an entire spread of newspaper that talks about the significance of this building to that community at that time. And so that, to me, laid the groundwork historically for why we now have such a well-functioning building today that has proven to be versatile, adaptable, and enduring. So I thank you for your time, and I encourage you to approve this nomination. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to speak? Great. Please sign in.
Hi, my name is Karen Crane. I'm from Iowa City, and I'm going to read a letter written by my friend Mitzi Reed that speaks for her and for me. Dear Historic Preservation Commissioners, on behalf of my family, I'm writing to express our support for listing Iowa City's Robert A. Lee Recreation Center on the National Register of Historic Places. The Lee Recreation Center, located at 220 South Gilbert Street in Iowa City, represents the ideal community rec center. It's a marvelous example of the underrepresented and sometimes underappreciated modern movement architectural style, and for more than 6 decades, it has continued to bring together area residents of all ages and from all walks of life to a central location to build a healthy community, just as it was intended. The Recreation Center was a significant consideration when my family recently chose to move to Iowa City and make our home within walking distance of downtown. We join many other residents who have repeatedly shown a deep appreciation for all forms of artistry in public spaces. The unique qualities of its efficient simplicity and innately welcoming atmosphere, filled with natural light and room to breathe, enable the Robert A. Lee Recreation Center to attract an incredibly diverse and joyful cross-section of our community. And it is, and has always been, a special place where lifelong connections and memories are made, because it was designed to do exactly that, provide a sustaining place of community for all. In response to comments in the city's May 15, 2024 memo describing how minor alterations to the building's interior and exterior have changed public perception or interaction with the building, we offer our considered feedback firsthand. While we cannot compare our current perceptions or interactions to what might have been in 1962, after reviewing the nomination and historical images in their entirety, we can say, with new eyes and a fresh public perspective, that we do not find these adaptations to be any impediment whatsoever to our perceptions or interactions with the building's modernist design principles as employed by the masterful hands of Mr. Wehner. If any of these minor elements have been diminished, it seems a nominal amount of restoration would alleviate the city's concerns. The Recreation Center stands out as an excellent example to all other communities of how art and function in historical public structure can coexist and flourish, as well as support the health and well-beings of generations of Iowa City residents. So it is with respect and admiration for architect Roland Wayner that we convey our support for the listing of the Robert A. Lee Recreation Center on the National Register of Historic Places, and thank him for facilitating our participation in the special community that continues to thrive within. Thank you for your consideration and for your efforts to preserve Iowa City's vibrant legacy of architecture and community building. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to speak during public comment? All right, we will close public comment and open up commission discussion.
Yeah, I would like to add, I did forget to mention that we did get numerous letters.
Yep.
And I did forward them to you. We printed out a packet that you have, and there's some back there for everybody else. We cut it off at noon, and so anything that came from noon on, just because of timing, getting it ready for the meeting, those have not been forwarded to you. I think there might have been 3 that came in later this afternoon.
I have a clarifying question for you, Jessica. So we're considering this building for the National Register of Historic Places. And if that becomes approved, does this building then fall under our jurisdiction? Would, if there are exterior changes to the building, are those things that we'll be informed of and be able to discuss? Would it act that way?
So, yeah, the answer to that is no.
Okay.
Listing in the National Register is, it's basically an honorarium. It acknowledges the history of the building and the significance of the building. It does get that history documented and out there, and it does let everyone know that it's listed in the National Register. For non-government owners, we do have tax credit things that are available for, rehabilitation and stuff like that. It does also trigger a review anytime that a federal money is involved in a project that impacts a building that is either listed or eligible for the National Register. The agency that is using the money and doing the project needs to evaluate whether or not their project will adversely affect the resource or not. Even if it does, that does not necessarily mean that the project would be stopped. Usually there's some kind of mitigation. It might mean that, say, if a building came down that was listed, then that agency or owner might have to then do a study or something to kind of mitigate for the loss. Or the agency could attempt not to have an adverse effect. So it would trigger a review if federal money was involved. But generally, the only way that it would come before you would be, say, if there was a Section 106 review related to it, because we do review either at the commission or staff level those types of projects, or if after this happened, it was locally designated. That's the only way it would impact otherwise. National Register listing does not prevent demolition or alterations on their own.
That was my next question, if it would protect it from demolition.
It would not.
Yes.
And it wouldn't protect it from alterations either. There would be no restrictions on that.
All right. Would somebody make a motion?
Wagner moves to recommend that the Iowa City Community Recreation Center at 220 South Gilbert Street is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places in criterion category A and C at the local level and meets the criteria for both significance and integrity. we would include the following comments. We would ask that the State Nomination Review Committee carefully evaluate the modernist elements of the design to determine if the building has enough integrity in this regard to remain eligible under Criterion C. Note that the caption for Map 4 implies that the 2001 study found a historic district that included the recreation center. This would be a misinterpretation of the map from the study where the district areas are shaded, not outlined.
Villanueva, second.
All right.
Now you can just discuss
Yeah.
and whether or not you want that motion or want to modify it or whatever.
I'll say, I mean, I feel convinced that we should move to approve. Yeah.
I perfected my ping pong game there in 1974.
Well.
And basketball and roller skating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a building of significance to the community. And I think, too, this will just highlight it even more. We know that space around the downtown, it can be kind of a vulnerable place. I was hoping maybe it would protect it from demolition. And also, I guess another hope of mine was that when I look at the building, I do see elements of mid-century design. Personally, it would be great to enhance some of those elements or to, I think Mary even mentioned the word restore. That would be very exciting from a historical perspective. But I'm convinced that this building really should have its day and be on the National Register, so.
And you should make sure that if you want to make comments, if you want to make these comments or different comments, you should make sure that you are clear on that as well, because we do need to include that in the form.
Okay. So if not, if we don't change the comments, it would just be written as it is here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody want to make a change or recommend a change?
I guess I do agree with keeping the information about Criterion C in there. That committee, it will do its job, but this is just kind of a nod to some of the things we're seeing. And then I understand what Mary's saying about time having passed, so that now this building, maybe if this survey or study were to be done again, that building might be included. But I guess we can't.
The downtown is actually listed as a district, and the boundaries do not extend that far.
Okay,
I mean,
understood.
Yeah.
And then wouldn't there be some kind of just restrictions due to the time period that it was built compared to when the time period, or due to urban renewal? Is that shaky? How does that work?
That would be a kind of complicated. When our downtown study was redone by Alexa McDowell, we reduced the boundaries from what Marlis had, partly because the Jefferson Street Historic District along that north edge had been listed, and the rest of that north edge were university buildings, and so we didn't really need to study them. And so we reduced that boundary. Alexa did determine that parts of downtown were only eligible if we included the urban renewal context. These buildings are more pre-urban renewal. Now, the destruction of the historic City Hall could be considered a portion of urban renewal, but the new civic corridor seems to be outside of the historic downtown, as the nomination for downtown was written by Alexa McDowell.
Got it.
Nominations can be modified, but there need to be a compelling reason and a reason why it would need to be included and stuff like that. So the boundaries also tend to be more regular. And so, say, reaching out the east edge just to capture, say, the rec center, with other non-contributing buildings in between, would not necessarily make a regular boundary. It would be a little bit irregular. So.
All right. I think unless there's any more discussion, we're ready to vote. And All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great.
And so for clarifying, just for the letter that we have
Yep.
to provide, we had 8 commissioners, and they all voted in the affirmative. All right.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. All right. Item E, report on certificates issued by chair and staff.
Yeah, maybe we'll pause just a second for shuffling in the audience.
It's nice to see people who like their buildings.
Woody teaches. Yeah, I love that he goes there all the time now. It makes me so happy. My son, 16. He'll be 17 in June.
5 hours.
The sock hops. I always should say I should go more.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and continue.
Yep.
We had several certificates of no material effect. This is 215 Brown Street, where this property recently changed hands, and most of the roof is being replaced. There's actually a section of metal roof on the top that will remain, but that's a modern addition, so it's not a historic roof. I'm sorry. We have 2 projects. This is not that project. This is the... You'll get that slide in a second. This is the replacement of the retaining wall between that property and the one that's on Dubuque Street. And this retaining wall and the fence above it will be replaced. There are some zoning code issues, so they couldn't extend all the way out to the street, but you'll see that replaced. 1022 East College Street, just some deck replacement materials. This is a house of a former commissioner, too. 1041 Woodlawn, much of the soffit and fascia were going to be replaced. Here are some of the photos that they showed for their evidence. Okay, so here's the one, 215 Brown Street, where the roof will be replaced with this shingle. It is kind of interesting because we do tend to approve like a brown or gray because of the wood shingle thing. Apparently this home was owned by an artist, and she had replaced it with a green shingle because she really liked it. And now I believe her grandson is the owner of the house, and he actually really wanted to go with a green shingle in order to honor his grandmother, and from our perspective, it looked more gray. So, that was kind of what happened there. PS1 has worked with the state to get an HRDP grant. It's a historic resource. No, it's a grant for some repairs to the Close Mansion, and they hired someone to evaluate the structure, and then I believe Shive Hattery as well went through and evaluated it, and they basically came up with a really detailed punch list with photos of areas showing this will be painted and repaired, this will be replaced. Some areas were just shots of the soffit from the ground saying evaluate when they get a ladder. And so we worked with them to approve everything that they have marked either as a repair or replace. And simply what they will do is continue to provide documentation of the deterioration for those areas that needed to be assessed because they weren't on a ladder yet. And based on their how they had already been evaluating it, we agreed that they would just provide us with the documentation and be able to proceed. They do need to do some work on some of the brick, and that will be handled separately. We had some minor reviews. I'm sorry, I don't know. This is just a staff review, including this, just a basic stoop and step replacement on this house in the Clark Street Conservation District. Summit Street Historic District. This is actually Frank's project, so it's a staff review because he would know it. It is a staff review. Anyway, these attic windows are deteriorated, but we also found out that they had brick mold trim, which it would not have, and some other things. So, excuse me, those windows are replaced.
Can you remind us what brick mold trim is?
Brick mold trim is a trim that is added to the window. It steps out because a window in, say, brick or stone is kind of recessed into the wall. And so you need to cover the gap for installing, but you also kind of want to make a transition from the window out to the brick or stone, partly to shed water. And so it has this kind of stepped out appearance. Modern construction uses brick mold trim for all buildings. We would approve it only for masonry construction, and then they would have no trim and use flat casing if it is a wood structure with, wood siding and trim. So, it would just come without any trim then. One of the windows in the back will also become a casement egress window in this case because they're making the attic an occupiable space. So this is 425 Oakland Avenue, and this cute little brick house was recently sold, and they are putting a bedroom and bathroom in the basement, and so this one rear window out of this pair will become an egress window. Does mean that the sill drops, and then they install a window well matching the foundation material.
Item F, consideration of minutes. Deanna?
It's all good. Thoman moves to approve the minutes for April 22nd, 2024.
Beck seconds. And we have to vote on this. All in favor? Aye. All right. Okay, commission discussion. Number 1, work plan and subcommittees.
Yeah, and I included a copy of your work plan. As usual, we need to get started on the awards for sure, and so it would be good to form a subcommittee for the awards. We kind of gave, staff is giving the commission and Friends an ultimatum that you need to be more involved, so there's less staff time involved in the awards if we want them to continue past last year, which was our 40th anniversary. Friends has reached out to me and said that they do want to be more involved, and so they're ready to be on the subcommittee and take a more proactive role. And so then, it's just up to the commission then as well. We would start with probably forming a subcommittee. I would hope that we would have at least 3 people or maybe 4 on that subcommittee. We would meet in June with the Friends rep, and then we'd kind of figure out how to move forward. We would need to find a location, set a date, and then start, put out a call for nominations and all of that. In the past, we've done September, and I think that we might be a little bit late to go with September right now, but that's something we can work out when the subcommittee meets.
I think we could do it. Just
Okay.
because it doesn't seem right to do it in October.
That's all up to you guys.
Is there anybody here who would like to be on the subcommittee for the awards?
I have been helping with it and would be glad to continue to do so.
Okay.
So I unfortunately don't think I'll be able to help.
Yeah, that's understandable.
You might be on break.
And I don't mind helping with the writing. I don't know that I would be able to make a meeting, though, if it's in the afternoon during the week. And I know, too, there are other subcommittees I'm kind of excited about, so. But I would help with writing.
So the idea would be the subcommittee meets in June, and then we proceed with putting out a call for nominations to the public?
At that meeting in June, I think that's when we would discuss, how we would proceed.
Could this be done in an email? I mean, at least get the process started?
Potentially.
Because if it could, I would be on the subcommittee. But I don't want to I will be I'll be on the subcommittee. I just don't want to overdo it. I've got a lot of other.
Frankly, it would be easier to do it over a Zoom meeting than
Yeah.
having to type out an email.
I would
that
almost
said everything.
Let's start with an email just to get anybody who's willing to even consider being on the subcommittee.
The subcommittee is, you're figuring out when, where, and how?
Well,
And writing it as well, or?
Traditionally, the subcommittee does select the winners that are then presented to the commission for approval, and then write up the information. I mean, we have compiling the information, we have reaching out to all of the owners to get information, we have inviting the owners, inviting the contractors, creating invitations for those, creating a program, creating the slideshow.
So that's a bigger list from last year, and that is part of us.
This is
taking
part.
Jessica did it all.
This,
I know.
This is part of, just
Us
what we
taking-
do. So like
Yes.
all of this. Now, obviously, I have a lot of the documentation and information about projects that would be nominated. And so to some respect, I will ultimately have to do some of that. But
we can
it's
strip
more
away the
about
busy work.
than throwing that off to the subcommittee to do most of it. We also have used our intern in the past a lot, and frankly, how much we use them depends on the abilities of the intern. I mean, it's a student intern, so, sometimes.
So real.
The year before I came, the intern did the entire awards.
Wow.
It was a very talented intern. They have had different degrees of help since then, so.
Okay.
And if
Put me on
it's,
that subcommittee, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
If it's a Zoom meeting?
I mean, if the times are working, like days are not.
let me
great for the
just-
teaching, but-
let me start with an email to Margaret, Andrew, Chris, Deanna. All right, we'll get, and then who's the representative from Friends? Do we know yet?
Well, it might be Ginley.
Okay, I'll
I'm
reach
not
out to
sure.
her.
So wait, who do we have?
Margaret, Andrew, Jordan, Chris. Deanna.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So there's 5 of us.
Oops, sorry.
There's 5 of us, and then one, and then possibly Jenny.
Yeah, and we do have a handy spreadsheet for all of the tasks that need to be done. I mean, since I've been here, that might have changed, and because we don't use it, but we could start with that too.
Okay. I'm setting myself a reminder to email everybody tomorrow. And then I think that we can be very efficient just to get the things
Sure.
moving.
Yeah.
So we feel like we're making some progress.
Yeah. And then for the rest of the discussion, if you, as a group, have other subcommittees or things that you want to start working on, that is for you to discuss now. I just wanted to make sure that we got started on the awards if we were going to do them this year.
Yeah, no, we are. And we'll get that rolling tomorrow. I have one question. The grant that PS1 received, was that due to there being a 501c3, or is it just available to historic properties?
Frankly, they didn't reach out to me, so I wasn't aware of it until they required review. So,
But it's a state grant?
It is a state grant. I don't think that they have to be a nonprofit for it. I think it is one of those grants that is available to any owner of a historic property, but I would need to look into it more to
Okay.
really know what it was.
Okay, I
'cause
can
I'm
reach
not
out. I
sure.
might ask. I'm just curious. I would like to talk about some of the things that Thomas wanted to raise. Number one, I think we should all just make a promise to each other to look up form-based code and try and wrap our heads around it. So that, because I think he's got a good point. My head is not wrapped around it still, but I know that I think his recommendation is probably a wise one to some degree.
It has been discussed at past planning and zoning meetings and city council meetings, and so you could get some information from those past meetings as
Okay.
well.
All right.
I don't know the dates of them.
Right, that sounds hard. But we'll get there.
You can search
Yeah.
through.
Oh, true, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so one of the things that came up, as everybody knows, we were successful in landmarking the 302 to 316 Bloomington, which is really exciting. It was a very long process, but Mayor Pro Tem brought up a number of things that were concerns of hers. The main one was staff time, just pushing for full-time staff. So I think all of us could be advocates for that. But then also, she spoke with some property owners who were very anti-historic preservation just due to restrictive guidelines. I don't really know quite how to approach this because I know that they're there for a reason, but I'm interested if there's, I think that it would be very helpful if we could provide more easy to digest education to the public. I know that the city has started putting out like social media graphics that explain, just if you're starting a project, reach out, and also there's grant funding. I think that's really helpful. But I think it would be really amazing to have like one graphic a week that explains different aspects of like why these materials should be rebuilt rather than replaced. Why are these like why a window should be rebuilt rather than replaced with something new. Just anything to kind of like bridge the gap between people feeling like it's a purposeless inconvenience and what we understand to be important about historic preservation. So I don't know. That's Iowa City Communication Department.
Yeah, that kind of thing. We would have to work through that at a staff level because, yes, it would be the communications department does the website and the social media, but we also have to get the right information for them to make the graphics and stuff. And I don't know how that breaks down for staff time in other departments and stuff like that. But
sure. That might be another subcommittee,
say, yeah.
But I mean, I do think educating the public is really important just to keep the goodwill high so that we can like keep doing what we're doing without too much pushback.
So I just want to mention this. I don't know how useful this is, but for example, in the Museum Studies program at the university, there's someone coming in to offer again the historic house management class. And so I immediately think of, I don't think we want people in these classes to do projects that burden city staff, but if part of what students generated in some of the, because part of obviously the Museum Studies program is how do you communicate stuff more effectively to the public, and so, I'm imagining assignments where, potentially people in these classes develop related materials. They obviously have to sign them over, like for the city to use as needed. But the idea would be, could they do any of the legwork of generating some of these graphics or other posts that could just be a bank of things that could be used whenever it seemed
That's
helpful.
that's something like that. Like if they could come from an outside source and then be provided to the city, so that maybe we wouldn't.
The whole
have to
deal's like,
burden
they'd have to
this.
be also like, you'd have to say, okay, modify it if you need to, right? I mean, it is yours, but I have done this legwork, and it would be something that would be at
Sure.
least.
Or is there also other places surely have other graphics that they posted? Can we repost things?
That's a good
Possible,
point.
yeah, that's
Surely.
possible.
Where it's
Yeah.
like these things have been even if it's just like, hey, here's why we do historic preservation, not necessarily specific to Iowa City, but it's still just information that's not whatever.
Yeah.
Where we don't actually have to do the work to make it. It's just more.
But somebody will have to spend the hours or the time anyway to find them, which is key. I don't
Yeah.
immediately know where to go now, but
Sure.
surely they must exist. I'm sure
Yeah.
you're right.
Is that something that a commissioner could reach out to city communications staff about directly, just to get?
I don't know, maybe I need to start, and, I can start talking to Ann about it and
Yeah.
then see what that process might be,
Okay.
because I don't know.
Okay. I just think it would be helpful.
Education and outreach is a part of, your directive and
Yeah.
the preservation plan and stuff too. So.
Yep.
What about a subcommittee for more landmarking or steps to build up to landmarking? Because
more like a district approach, like local districts?
Well,
Or
I
just
think
individual?
we have a list of buildings and homes that are maybe landmark eligible. Do we do anything with that list? We're coming right off of having landmarked the Bloomington Street property. Is now the time to think about some of these other properties and work at it kind of slowly, deliberately, see if there are property owners who are interested in doing something like that
Right.
and working with them.
Right.
So
The
we don't get
low-hanging
to
fruit.
a point where the public is surprised and the council is surprised and suddenly it's, yeah, I guess the emergency state of the Poly Ice building, I just don't quite know how we got, how it became such a,
Well, it was a long time. It just,
Yeah.
it was turned down by the council twice. So it, I mean, it was, isn't that right? It was
Well,
twice. And
we-
it finally went through.
It was first on our agenda in October.
But I mean, even years and years ago with other councils.
It wasn't turned out by the council. It was that planning and zoning rejected it
There you go.
in, I think, '84, and some other things. But it was, I don't know if it ever actually got to council.
But I guess the low-hanging fruit thing is the point of creating like a wave of these, that it's like, oh, it looks like we're,
I think that's a great idea. There's a few places that I'm aware of that might be possible, that I think would be a good idea to just kind of get the conversation started. And then as far as, what is the list that you're talking about? Is it?
I thought maybe we had a list of, I don't know if it was,
Of identified
Jessica,
properties?
Yeah, there was like a study where there was 24 properties, you said, that were determined in the downtown area you had eyed them for designation.
So right before I came, there was a subcommittee that in late 2014 started compiling lists of properties that were eligible but were not part of districts. And the subcommittee, I mean, they literally went through all of these 3-ring binders that I have in my office with site inventory forms about properties. Working through that list in 2015, they narrowed it down to, I can't remember how many properties that they felt they wanted to move forward with. And so then, after I came here, we started doing some of the research that hadn't been done, figuring out some of the property ownership, changes over time, some of the basic information beyond the site inventory forms that we would want to include to landmark them. And, and then that's kind of where it stopped. So we do have a list of those, and I think you guys would want to evaluate that, whether or not those are the properties that you're interested in, or if there's others or not some of those. You could start with that list if you'd like.
Sure. Would you send that to us, to the commission?
Yeah, and I have to see if it's actually like a list. I mean, we do have some lists. I mean, we got to the point where we were going to mail the owners to have a preliminary meeting, and so we have at least that list.
Yeah.
because I'm thinking, you would think maybe there are some property owners who don't realize their property is eligible. Maybe they want to be a landmark, and that just would be exciting and a more positive outcome. It's something, the property owner didn't agree with what happened at Bloomington. It'd just be nice to have a situation where the owner wants it, the community wants it, and we see how it's beneficial to have a property be landmarked.
here's the service we're providing as opposed to
Yeah.
force coming in.
Right.
On that subject, I want to get in touch with the Realtor, with Rex, Gary Scarda's Realtor, and just send him some ideas that he could include in the listing that might make it
Yeah, that's
entice
nice.
possible owners, possible buyers. like the grant information, or the tax incentive and grant information and stuff like that.
And are you saying that because you want me to do that?
No,
Or, I mean,
no.
because you have
I'm
his
personal- I'm
email
happy to
address.
do it.
Because you were copied on all multiple emails
Yeah.
with him. Mhm.
Yep. That's something I want to do because I don't just want to like drop it. And-
Well, and we made, a couple of years ago, we made presentations because we were presenting about the districts to some of the realtor groups. They asked for it. And so we could even do something like give you that presentation so
Great.
that you have that information.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right. Anything else?
And that's permissible, right? I mean, that someone from this commission can give information about, here's how landmarking might work for you, and here are the benefits. I mean, it's,
You guys are, you're part of the commission, but you're also advocates. So
Okay.
yes, you can do that.
all right.
I remember, and maybe this falls under education and outreach, I remember an earlier discussion of like public signage in the area of the Iowa City barrio by the railroad tracks.
Oh, yeah.
Mexican,
Yep.
So there is a University of Iowa grad who's now a postdoc at Princeton in both history and anthropology who did some work on Mexican-American communities in Iowa City and actually has written some nice stuff already, doing some historical research about the barrio. So I guess the question is partly, one thing that might be good to start with is what would the contours of the signage be? I mean, because I don't know how publicly available some of this really interesting stuff that he's written is. Like, I don't know that it links to necessarily Iowa City resource pages. Like, if you Google it, you get the scholarly articles and there's
So-
some blog posts, but.
We just hired a new art director or arts editor. I'm the art director, and I still have my job. I'm still employed at Little Village, and his name's Chuy Renteria, and he is one of the story ideas he proposed during his interview was that park and the history of the Mexican community and the boxcar, neighborhoods. So he might be a really good resource. He might be a really good person to just connect with that individual so that they could, because he could just do like an interview with the academic.
Is he the dancer, and he
Yes.
wrote a book, and
Yes.
he's from North Liberty?
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
West Liberty.
West Liberty, West Liberty, jeez me, I know.
So why don't you?
That's exciting.
Let's be in touch about that, and then we could get that rolling.
And just so you know, because I am keeping the Parks and Rec director up to date on the fact that you're interested, and in the past it has been interested in not only the signage but potentially the naming if there was a renaming, partly to tell this story. And she does know you're interested, and I keep telling her so that she keeps that in mind. It is, I can't remember specifically, but it is potentially a few years off. So just so you're aware, I would assume that the commission could, move forward with things like research and stuff so that you could eventually develop the kind of proposal that could be presented or something like that. I mean, I would assume that's the direction you'd take.
And just some public awareness, like some stories, yeah.
Oh, well, Margaret is here, too, while we have her on our commission.
Yes, well, and you were
Margaret was reappointed,
Reappointed.
so.
I will be here still.
Good, good, I'm so glad.
If I had somebody from the community reach out asking about over like the Glendale Morningside neighborhood, and they were talking about getting that signage for that one area with the racetrack, then they didn't know, they said, what are our next steps to try to get some signage? Is that something that they should contact?
They already did.
They did, okay.
And Ann and I are trying to, this is like the third time that we've had someone reach out about
Okay.
signage, and we're trying to figure out how to handle
Okay.
all of those types of things. This one is very related to the guy who wanted the information about the train accident on a sign and stuff. So, I don't know yet, but we're trying to figure out,
As long as, yeah.
which department these inquiries go to and how we handle them, because we don't know yet.
Okay.
So, but they did reach out.
Awesome.
All right. I think
Anything
that's
else?
enough discussion. Commission information, I think those were folded in together. All right, move to adjourn.
Thoman moves to adjourn.
All right. Oh, sorry, I need a second, don't I?
Wagner seconds.
All right, thanks, everybody.